and Ware School Board Candidates Night. I am School District Moderator David Recupero, and the candidates are, for Selectmen, are Frederick Hippler, Sherry Burdick, and Thomas Clow. So we're going to give each candidate a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions. Would you come? I ask that everyone be respectful and not engage in personal insults or be disruptive of other people's time talking. I thank you. We will start with Mr. Hippler.
Well, good snowy evening it is. Glad you all could make it. My name is Frederick, also known as Ricky Hippler. I've lived in town my entire life. Been on the Ware Fire Department, started as an explorer when I was 16 years old. Been on the fire department now for 14 years. Current role is a captain in the south end of town. Finishing up my first term as selectman. Currently the vice chair of the board. As the youngest member of the board, I feel there's been some challenges back and forth. I'm trying to bring in some new school thought and my age group thought, and sometimes we usually come to a very common ground. It's very easy to come to common ground, but I know that the town is changing a little bit, and there's growing pains. And like I said, I'm trying my best to make it through those growing pains and move the town forward. So, like I said, I'm running for a second term. There's some loose ends I'd like to see tied up in my tenure. I probably will not run for a third term like Tom Cloud has, or he's going for his fourth term now. But I think 6 years is a good number to put down. As community service for the town, especially on the local government. And I also did 6 years as a Board of Fire Wards member, too, for the fire department. So, like I said, I'd like to give back to my community in the best ways I know how. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sherry Hadley Burdick, and I'm running for selectman because I feel that we need more transparency in the town government. I want to see people work together as a team and get items corrected that need to be corrected. My professional background is 32 years in engineering and management. I have volunteered at many different groups in town, probably for 45 years now. I was on the Ware Building Committee. I was involved with the whole renovation of the Historical Society. I'm 18 years in the Historical Society, 11 years as president. I've written several grants and got them for the town, saving the town some money. I think, we need to make sure that all the town policies are being followed, and that answers, if a question is asked, that we get the answer back to people in a timely fashion. I'm also concerned about taking care of our conservation land and the wildlife. And actually today I was coming home along Perkins Pond Marsh, and I saw a great big bald eagle sitting out there on one of the trees, so it was kind of a nice thing to see. I want to make sure that we keep our tax base down as low as possible. I know that there's a lot of elderly people in town now that are struggling to keep their homes, and there are people that just can't pay the taxes anymore. And I think that's an important part of it, is to maintain a low tax rate. So that's what I'm all about. So thank you.
Thank you. Tom Clow. I moved to Ware with my family in 1973. Moved into an old house beside what was then Colburn Brothers store in North Ware Village. And we've been working on that house ever since. I have been involved in many ways in the town, in community service since that time. I was a baseball coach when we had what was called the Ware Junior Baseball Program, which is a pre-runner to the Ware Athletic Club. And I actually directed that for 12 years and coached in it for most of those years as well. I was on the school board. I have been on the school board for 6 years. I have been a selectman for 12 years. And during that time also on the planning board for 8 of those years, the CIP committee, which is Capital Improvement Program, for 3 years representing the Board of Selectmen. So I'm pretty familiar with the government processes in town. As far as my background, my major career was as an educator. I graduated from Keene State College and then got a master's in what's called a CAGS from University of New Hampshire, and was a teacher for 20 years and then a school principal for 17. As I was reaching the end of that career, we kind of started a new one because my family and I bought Colburn Store and operated that for 12 years, so I worked as a local business person as well. Sherry mentioned the tax rate, and I am proud of the fact that we have been able to keep it stable. Right now, and I said the same thing at deliberative session, so forgive me, I'm repeating myself, but our town tax rate, the town portion of your bill, which makes up about 16% of your bill, is $3.80 per thousand. And that's by far the lowest of any in the area. The next closest is the town of Dunbarton, which has a municipal tax rate of $4.63, and then New Boston, $4.80, and after you look beyond that, you're getting into anywhere from $6 to $10 as a municipal tax rate. And I'm talking about all of the communities around us, the adjacent communities, and then sort of one out from that, Bow, all the way to Milford, to Bradford, to Warner, and then all of those that are adjacent to us as well. So we truly do have the lowest tax rate in the area. But I think what goes with that is the balance that we've been able to find. Because if you look around, we've got a new highway garage that was completed this last year, and that tax rate includes made payments on that in 2017. We approved a new 3-year contract with the highway department, not highway, that was a couple of years ago, but with the police union. We purchased 3 new cruisers. We've got a new grader that we're making payments on. We bought it on a 5-year lease-to-own plan, and I think we're going with payment number 4 this year. We bought a couple of new replacement plow trucks. These are all within that $3.80 per thousand tax. So nobody likes to receive their tax bill, but when you look at what we've got and what we're paying in taxes for it, Ware's a pretty good deal. I don't take credit for that. I really give the credit to the department heads and the way they've managed the department heads more than me, but I have been part of setting that tax rate, of course, as a selectman. As far as the needs, some of the obvious needs ahead of us, and I know Sherry would agree with this, is some of our buildings are definitely in need of repair, and that's what we got to get on to here in the near future. Thank you.
All right, now if any member of the public would like to come to the microphone and ask a question of the candidates for selectmen, so maybe just come towards the microphone, state your name and your question.
Now that it has a little bass to it, Dennis, I think your question had to do with the raises for police chief and the town administrator and how they related to the default budget. Can't hear you, Neil? When we put together our budget, and that includes the default, we run it by our attorney. And so the things that we put in there was something that we had checked with the attorney. However, there was a citizen who disagreed with that and who brought a lawsuit against the town. Ironically, it was spelled out in such a way that it seemed like it was against me, not the town, because it said versus Clow. But I understand how that happened, being the chairman of the board. But the raises given to these two people, we wanted to not change horses in the middle of a stream, so to speak, and keep our police department on the avenue it's been on toward regular improvement. So we rehired our part-time chief with a new contract and put that in the default budget. We also made a major pay adjustment to our town administrator. Our town administrator is Naomi Bolton, and Naomi was earning $9,000 less than the town administrator in New Boston, $12,000 less than the town administrator in Hopkinton. So we brought her pay up to something more like equal to Hopkinton. And we've gotten people questioning us on that because of the amount of it. I will say this, that we have a person who can do virtually every job in the building and also has provided, I feel, good leadership over the years that she's been here. But that's really not the issue. The issue was whether or not we could put these in the default budget, which we did, and it was brought to court, and the judge who ruled on it said that although she saw the point of view from both sides, she ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, saying that we shouldn't have had those because they were not part of a previous budget that had been approved. Consequently, they hadn't, as contracts, been approved before. Now, in previous years, we've had a lot of contracts that we have written, and we've included them in the default budget. For example, one of the contracts that was questioned here, besides those two, was our contract for assessing. I know everybody would like to see the assessors go away, but we do need to contract with them. So we went out to bid. We got several bids from different companies. We ended up selecting the same one because the service has been good and the bids were close. So we signed a new contract with that person. We also had contracts for hauling trash, hauling recyclables. Lawn care I don't think was this year, but we regularly do sign contracts during the course of the year for lawn care, for the cemeteries, for the town grounds, and so forth. There are lots of things during the course of the year that we sign these contracts for, and we have put them in the default budget. That was questioned, and it went through the legal process, and that's where it stands now. We revised the default budget, again, with advice from our attorney. After the court decision, we took those out, those contracts that were mentioned, the increases to those contracts. We put other things back in that we had taken out, which we could legally have done to begin with. We could have left them in there. So that's where the whole issue is. It's with there are two contracts that were large that related to the town administrator and the chief police, and there were other ones that were smaller that we agreed to during the course of the year that were questions. So we'll see where it goes. The town has appealed that decision, and again, we'll just have to see where it goes. Obviously, whatever the court ultimately decides, we'll abide by.
All right.
Right. What he said, I know you probably can't hear, is that his main concern wasn't the amount, but his main concern was issuing the contracts without the approval of the town. And that is the issue. That's the court issue. Now, is it legal for the Board of Selectmen to sign contracts through the course of the year and include them in the default budget, or is it not? And as of right now, with that court decision, even though we have done that in the past, is saying that this court said, no, we shouldn't have put those in there. So that's going to affect many communities if that stands, because our attorney, it's Mitchell Municipal, which indicates that they represent a lot of towns. That's their business, and they've been giving the same advice to other towns as well. So we'll see how it goes, and obviously we'll abide by whatever the final decision of the court is.
Is that money going back in the budget, that $13,000 raise that they got without the approval of the town, that the judge voted in favor of the plaintiff? Is that money going back in the budget?
Yeah, it would be good if, I'll repeat your question so that people know what you're talking about, but if we could come up and somehow
Yeah.
get...
Please come to the microphone if you ask questions, because at least hopefully we can hear what you're trying to say.
My question, my question was whether the money's going back in the budget now, because in today's society, I don't know a whole lot of people that get a $13,000 increase in 1 year. So the money, you said the judge voted in favor of the plaintiff on this. So does that mean the money is going back in the budget for the raise that was given without authorization, is my question.
It's in the proposed budget anyway, so if everybody votes for the proposed budget, it becomes a non-issue. But in the default budget, no, it's lowered to the previous amount. And I know that there is disagreement with this, but there are a lot of things in that budget that we could have kept higher, but we made lower when we created the default budget. So we went back with the okay of our attorney on how we did it and transferred some other lines in there because we have signed these contracts. We need our assessors on board. That's an increase that's as much as the contract of the increase there is just about the same as what we're talking about with the town administrator. We need to have them on board. We use the April 1st assessments of property, the valuation on April 1st of each year to decide on the amount we're taxing people. So we need a contract with the assessor. So we are going to pay that. We'll have to pay it out of other lines in the budget, the same as these other items that were approved.
Thank you, Mr. Clow. I'd like Ms. Burdick and Mr. Hippler put their comments in on this before we move on to other questions.
Well, I was surprised with the amount of money that were given in those two contracts. One was the police, was $6,000, I believe, and I believe Naomi's wasn't 13, but 14,000. And my concern is that the other people that are town administrators that are making $90,000 a year or thereabouts have been doing those jobs for 30 years. And my concern is that we've just got done, I think the town did the town administrator a big favor by paying for all of her schooling over the last 5 years. And I just think it was too much money at one time, and I feel that we should have held that back and done something that was more middle of the road. I mean, today, a 5% increase is a pretty big increase, and that would be for doing an outstanding job. And I don't know what her goals and objectives have been for the last 6 years, but I would want to see that out and have it evaluated, what her goals and objectives have been for the last 6 years. And then, on top of that, I would want to see how much money she's actually saved us, because town administrators should be working to save money everywhere, whether they're writing grants and saving money that way, or they're finding other avenues to save money. So my thought on that was that that would have never happened. And like I said, I was in manufacturing principals for a lot of years, and I worked as an engineer and a manager, and an average increase for an engineer that was doing an excellent job, I mean outstanding job, on the average was probably 5%, and they were saving the company a lot of money in most cases. So that's my take. Thank you.
I would agree, and as a sitting board member, I agree that that big of a raise is astronomical. I sit back and I look and I think, okay, what have I benefited from? And I say benefited, but every time that I ask for a question, I get an answer like that. And it's off the top of the head like that. And I look at the position. It's a hard position. I've gone in there many times, and I'll go, hey, what are you doing? And it's doing somebody else's job. It's doing this job. And like Tom said, jack of all trades, master of none. I'll claim to that. You know, I'm learning. I've only been, like I said, my first term as a selectman, my third year. I'm still learning. I don't think if you stop learning, it's time. But I'm learning all the time, and with the lawsuit that the town is in, I've learned quite a bit. Not going to lie. I mean, the RSAs are coming out that I didn't know existed. I don't claim to read every RSA in the book. My full-time job is a shop foreman at a heavy truck garage, and then I'm still doing 20 to 30 hours a month in calls in the fire department. So sitting down and cracking the RSA book open, I'd probably fall asleep real quick. But I'm learning that I remember growing up, going over to the Center Woods and listening to town meeting when that was how everything was decided, was town meeting. And the yelling and back and forth, and SB2 is different. And I guess my question is, and the reason that I supported the appeal is I want to clarify how a town is supposed to operate with, you put something out for bid, and every year fuel goes up, iron goes up, costs go up. So more than likely costs are going to go up with new bids. So how are those covered under, and how are you supposed to make contracts when it's not something you can bring to, say, town meeting? Can't do that anymore. So I'm very interested to find out how that works. But as for the percentage of raise, I figured out, again, I know I am kind of the exception, but I did figure it out. The raises that I've gotten in the last 5 years equate to 17% of my pay. So I mean, it's not that's not attainable. It's very much so uncommon, but again, I look at the cost savings in the long run as well. We all know, this whole room knows, the previous past of the police department. I'm sure we all have a story to do or tell. And the way I look at it is, the gentleman in the back has saved us a considerable amount of money. One lawsuit wipes out Naomi's raise, wipes out the chief's raise, and wipes out a lot of tax money. So if we save even one lawsuit from the town due to the police department, we'll use that as it's money well spent to me. And again, that's the way I look at it, is money well spent to hold continuity and to hold stability. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do need to move on to some more questions as time is limited. Yes.
I had a question for Tom. Did you know what the total cumulative value of the town administrator's raise would be in the 5th or 6th year of the contract? And can you tell us what that number is?
I'm sorry, could you clarify what you mean?
The raise in the 5th or 6th year, what does it amount to percentage-wise, the cumulative value of the contract?
Oh, what are you talking about? The town administrator's contract?
Yes.
I'm going to politely ask the moderator that we move on to other subjects.
Oh, why is that, Tom?
I'll answer your question, but I mean, I don't want to spend the whole evening here just talking about the town
Well, you could have
administrator's
said,
contract.
you must know the value of it.
I would have to go back. The first and second year, it's exactly the same. And
No,
then,
I'm at 5th and 6th year, the total cumulative value, Tom.
yeah,
5th and 6th year, north of 25%.
All right, try to avoid.
I can't answer that for you. I'm sorry, Tim. It's not because I don't want to, but I don't have that figure here, and I would have to calculate it out. I know that for the first 2 years, it stays exactly where it was without any raises for the first 2 years.
So if I understand, it's that you don't have the figure off the top of your head. You can get the figure at a later date and provide
Right.
it.
Everything else on the top of my head is missing, but I don't have that. So.
Okay, this is, are you finished?
Yeah. Say your name and question.
Helene Kirk, I'm Mount
this is for everyone. How do you define your budget priorities when tough decisions have to be made?
Can you repeat the question? I wasn't exactly expecting to get it right first.
I got on another topic, right? How do you define your budget priorities when tough decisions have to be made?
I look at it as what is going to benefit the town now, tomorrow, in a year, 2, 5, 10 years from now. What's going to happen in the future? To try and keep, again, the town moving forward, preserving the history of the town, and doing what's best for the citizens, doing what's best for the employees. And I happen to be one of those employees, so I know exactly what happens when crucial budget decisions are made, how it downline affects everybody that has to work under it. I understand that because I've worked for it for the past 14 years. I didn't understand it my first few years on the fire department and or the Board of Fire Wards, the direct impact that the budget actually does make at the end of the day. All I would hear is, we got a default budget or we got the proposed budget. Well, what did that mean to me? Not a whole lot. Now it means a whole different subject to me. But when something comes up, I'll use the old police cars as an example. Being a mechanic and seeing all those bills come across, absolutely was a thorn in my side. Seeing all the mechanic bills come across and a $75,000 maintenance bill at the end of the year, to me that was not money well spent, and that hurt. But it was a necessary evil. Unfortunately, we had to have police cruisers on the road. So knowing again how it's going to affect basically everybody within town limits is how I prioritize.
I don't have as much experience as these two because I haven't had to deal with that. But if I had to pick and choose, I would look at what's absolutely necessary and then weed out anything that's not necessary. So if there was any extra here or there, it would be gone, and we would deal with what we need as far as if there's plowing that has to be done, we have to have trucks to do it, and we have to have they have to be kept up. I mean, if we've got items that that's to be voted on, and it's not a necessary item, then I don't think we should. If it's not necessary, we shouldn't be voting on it. So I think you pick and choose the ones that are absolutely necessary and take the fluff out, and keep the town running and keep it safe, and that's what I would do.
Yeah, I think the key word there is safe, and I think that if you're establishing priorities, that your town safety services, which to me means your police, fire, and highway, keeping having police officers there readily available when you need them is, how can you argue with that? The fire department, the rescue squad, these people have to be there when you need them. It isn't the number of calls, it's the availability when the call comes in. So having that as a priority in your funding is very important, obviously crucial to life. And all we have to do is look outside tonight to see how critical our highway department is, and having machinery that will run properly and replacing it. So as Rick said, we don't pour a lot of money into old trucks or machinery that would we really need to replace it. So those three are, of course, top of the list, but then you have to look within those and say, okay, what's most important that we do this year in the police department, this year in the highway department, this year in the fire department. So it's different all the time, but I think you always have to keep in mind, what do we have to do to keep the town safe? And those are our priorities.
All right, thank you. Another question?
Richard Brown. Tom, this is for you. Last year, we voted for a backhoe, and the town rejected it. How did we get into a lease already with a backhoe buyout lease? Do you think that's a waste of money?
No, not really.
When you can hire one, you don't run that thing every day.
I'll answer it best I can, okay, Rick? We did not have a roadworthy, the town did not own a roadworthy backhoe. To me, a highway department should have a backhoe, but you're right, the voters rejected that. So what our highway DPW director did was to rent one during the course of the year to use for everything he needed it for. A big thing was cleaning culverts. That was an ongoing project. And he was then able to have 80% of that rental cost applied toward buying the same machine. We need a backhoe down there. I mean, I don't know about hiring out, but then if you hire out, you're going to pay for the driver separately when you have drivers on the crew already.
Yeah,
So-
but you rent a machine, you rent it so much an hour. It's either $85, $95 an hour. It comes with an operator. You're done with it. It goes home. You're not paying overtime. You're not doing this.
All I'm telling you, I can tell you what we did, what the highway director did, and that was his decision to make. And personally feel that getting 80% of it back toward a new machine is a pretty good deal.
Ms. Burdick?
It was directed to Tom.
Yeah, we don't allow other people to put comments in if they have any on the issue.
I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know why the decision was made or not made. I wasn't there, and I wasn't involved with any of it, so it's hard for me to say. I mean, I think if they need a backhoe and it's something they're going to use on a fairly regular basis, then it's probably cheaper for the town to buy one than to rent it. If it's something that's only used periodically, then it needs probably to be looked at.
I think a backhoe is an essential tool for the highway department. I don't think it's any highway department you see around us that doesn't have one, of one size or another, or one application or another. And, you know, trying to keep, I mean, why wouldn't you, I'll use another example, why wouldn't you try and do your own front brakes on your car instead of contract them out? Try and save a little bit here and there. So I understand that renting the machine has a cost to it, but putting our operator in it is a less of a cost. So to rent the machine and then be able to have that at the end, have that 80% put towards it, to me is for something that we can't put on the road anymore, our own backhoe that we do have, it makes perfect fiscal sense to apply that money towards the new backhoe. The old one, I don't know if everybody knows, but the old one that we have is still running, but it's the one that's up at the transfer station, and it's an older, it's 18 years old. It's a unit that you probably can't get parts for readily anymore. It's not a name brand, it's not a John Deere or a Cat, it's a Furmac. Parts are very expensive when you can get them, so it's going to live its life out until it's no longer serviceable at the transfer station. That new backhoe will not be used to compact the demo or the scrap iron. It will use that old one up until it cannot go anymore. So it's not like that new machine is going to be bashing on pins and wearing out prematurely at the transfer station. It's going to be on the road, as Tom said, doing ditching, doing culverts, doing whatever else it needs to do I'm more of a proponent of maybe if it's Cram Road, instead of maybe driving it up there, maybe we trailer it up there instead of driving it. But again, that's an operational procedure more so than, now, that's just my opinion. So,
All right. Any more questions for the candidates?
Hello, my name is Jen. I just have a question I just want to clarify. So far tonight, we've talked about two things, a pay increase and the purchase of a backhoe, both of which were rejected by the town. But it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you decided to go ahead with it anyway, regardless of the fact that the town voted it down. Is that right?
the backhoe, yes. The pay raise, no.
The pay raise didn't get rejected.
No,
It
no.
came out of the default budget.
The pay raise was negotiated over this year, the fiscal year,
Okay.
not done at town warrant time. So that
Okay.
wasn't like an article you'd see on the ballot.
Okay.
But the last year the backhoe was, and you know the thing is yes, it was rejected. I agree, it was rejected last year, but it's still an essential piece that needs to be that needs to be used up there, and. Again, where last year's number, the actual cost number was a lot higher, again, we had this deal put in front of us to apply 80% of that rental fee for basically 12 months towards that cost. So it's already money we've spent, so it's money, again, that we don't have to come up with. That's why I supported it right away, was putting that money forward. And the warranty start date, we've already had it for a year. The warranty start date doesn't start until we sign the sales lease, the sales slip. So we still get we got a full year out of it already, and we still get the warranty time. So, eventually, regardless, we have to have that piece of equipment. And that's why I feel that putting it on the ballot again, and the same thing happened to a fire truck a few years ago. We had to go 3-4 years. The money was sitting in a special revenue fund to be spent, but the taxpayers have to authorize that money to be spent. So it was a zero tax impact to that particular unit. And sometimes, like I said, I hate to say, try until everybody hates looking at it, so they say yes. That's not what I want to do at all. But, if it's an essential piece to make the town either, function or safer, I'm for it. Keep going for it.
All right, thank you.
You have a question? I don't know if they want to answer the previous question, then they may.
Good evening, John Van Walkerhill Road. This question is for Ms. Burdick. Earlier in your opening comments, you made a statement that you wanted to increase transparency. What are your plans for increasing transparency among the board and in town? Thank you.
What I'd like to see is when people come in and ask a question, I want to make sure it gets answered. And that doesn't always happen. The other thing I want to see is I want to see all the policies followed, and that doesn't always happen. So I think that when someone comes in, I want them to know, and if they come to the selectmen's meeting, I would like to see the people that are coming in know what's going to be discussed fully, not just a one blurb line. I mean, I've been in other towns. They actually pass a pamphlet out, like a small pamphlet with all the information in it, so you can follow along and you know what's being signed, what's not being signed, and all of it is open. So I think we just need to make sure that people feel that there's full transparency, and when there's an item that comes up, and it's being discussed, that all the information is given out, that you get a full answer that night. Because believe me, I go up at night and I've asked questions and I don't always get an answer, and it makes me very upset because I've asked questions back in April. I still don't have an answer yet. So unless I really want to get upset with them and go file a right to know law, that's probably the next step if I want to know. And I want everyone to feel comfortable to go into a selectman meeting and come out with the answer, and not be told something that's not right, or maybe we'll get back to you, because it doesn't always happen. Okay?
Well, obviously, I think that it would be obvious that I would say I feel that we're very transparent in our actions. Some of the things that Sherry has brought up may very well have been true, that we didn't have an answer on a given night for something. But we do our best. We televise all of our meetings, which I think is very important for all committees and in the town. The only time that we use non-public is usually for personnel issues that can't be discussed in public without threat of a lawsuit if we're talking about individual cases. But primarily, those are what our public or interviewing candidates before we make a motion to hire them, things like that. Other than that, we're doing business in public. We're on camera all the time. The other part of what Sherry's saying, I can't disagree with. There are times we don't have the answers there on the spot. And, if we haven't gotten back to her in that amount of time, then that's not right, of course. But I don't know what specific it is that we're talking about here. I know we went through a lot of questioning about things when the highway garage was being built, and perhaps that's part of it, I don't know. But we do our best, and I feel very transparent as a board. I've never known in all the different boards that I've been on, as far as boards of selectmen and the people who have been on them with me over the years, I've never known anybody who wanted to be anything other than transparent.
I mean, I don't think you gain anything by hiding stuff. You don't. It's not that we want to not be transparent. That we're not trying to, hide anything. Not trying to be mischievous about anything. There's some things, like Tom said, that can't be talked about in public, and that's why the RSA 91 is there. For reputation sometimes, or if you're discussing personal matters. Sitting here and obviously it's food for thought. Instantly, I start thinking about it. A couple times coming up that, like Sherry mentioned, it might not be a bad idea to try, and I don't know what the logistics are. With some of these contracts or documents that we have in front of us that have not been provided to the public, or I say the public, but the citizens that are at our meetings, maybe we can put them up on like a projector screen. I don't know. It's an idea, but to say that we are trying to hide something is not the case. Again, I've been on both sides of the podium, and the chair, and there was a couple times I was like, why aren't they telling us these answers? Why aren't they telling these answers? And being on the other side of it, I can see why sometimes the answers aren't there. Now, granted, if a question is asked, yes, within reasonable time, there should be an answer provided, if possible. But sometimes just a question on the spot might not have the answer to it right there, so it may need some time to get that answer. So, like I said, I don't think that this board, my personal feeling, has ever been tried to be misleading or, like I said, hide anything.
Okay. Is there any other question? Yes.
Helene Kirk again. What do you see as the most critical issue facing Ware now?
Any of you can start off.
I think critical issue is that the town's going to continue to grow, and we're going to have to truly really manage our money. And when jobs are done, they need to be done right the first time. We don't want to have to do the jobs 2 and 3 times to get them done right. And there are more than one example that the jobs have had to be done over again because no one has gone through and actually looked at the people that we're hiring. And we get a job done, and it's a mess. And, perfect example was the town hall doors fell right off the building after they were put on, a year after they were put on or so. They were fixed, and then it took 3.5 years to get the second set put on. I worked on that project initially and spec'd out what needed to be bought, and it wasn't, what I spec'd out was not done. And we wasted it. It was probably $30,000, and now we've ordered more doors, put more doors on, and they're not installed very good. So I think we need to learn to look at all these people that are coming in to do work and truly get somebody that knows what to look at. So we're not paying for stuff 2 and 3 times. If the job's not done right, they don't get paid. You do the job, and when it's right, it's right. But not until.
Was it the major issue facing the town? Well, I agree with part of what Sherry said, and that is we do have a lot of work that has to be done on our buildings. I think that the town hall, when you drive by it, is an embarrassment the way it looks right now. But this is something that's not easily fixed. But I think that we talk about transparency. I think it's important that the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen work more closely together. That is overwhelming. You know, we have been trying to, for years, through various warrant articles, have all of the Finance Committee meetings televised. Why there's a reluctance to that, I have no idea. But the reluctance is still there. I think that that would help a lot with the town business. And also, if there's a reason for a particular warrant article not being supported, to talk that out and not kind of have veto power, speaking of the Finance Committee, and I'm not speaking down against anybody on the committee. It's a hard job, the same as the Selectmen's job is a hard job. But we've got to work more closely together in order to get a budget together that we can all live with, that's reasonable for the town, and we don't get into the kind of controversies that we were talking about earlier in the meeting here today. That's a big deal, is getting the Finance Committee and the board to come together. The Finance Committee saying, okay, this is why we can't support your budget this year. And having that spelled out, and then the Board of Selectmen go back and say, well, is there any way that we can compromise on this? We've done that on individual warrant articles. The Board of Selectmen changed, I think, 3 different articles this year after getting not a direct response, but an understanding that if we didn't do something, the Finance Committee was not going to support them. So we made some changes in that, and they supported them. And I think that should be like down the line. We should just work together. Now, I don't know whether that means that, again, I'm not proposing this step, but sometimes towns have budget committees that are elected and are directly involved in the budgeting process. Is that for where? I don't know. But that's a big issue for the town, I think, moving forward, so that we can work more closely together in preparing budgets and not having this level of controversy that often exists between these two bodies.
Is that the most critical issue facing our town? Because that was my question. What is the
Right, and I think that is one of the most critical issues. There are lots of others. We have to get busy on our master plan that's like 12 or 13 years old, and that would go through the planning board with the help of the Southern New Hampshire Planning. Takes money again, but that's certainly an issue that's facing us, because Sherry mentioned grants and things, and sometimes the ability to write a grant for something reflects back on what is your master plan. So that's a big one too. The infrastructure of our buildings is important, but again, I do feel that one of the most critical issues is that communication factor between Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee.
You know, a couple of things have come to mind that I'll mention. I think probably the absolute critical thing in our town is the roads. The roads are really need a lot of repairs, and we're talking a lot of money. You know, we're right now paving, I think we're fixing and paving about 1 mile worth of roads a year. And there's a tremendous amount of work to be done on roads and bridges. And, you know, that may be an area where we have to increase the amount of money and take it away from for a few years and back off on some of the other departments, because I don't know enough about it at this point yet, but I think that you have to look and see how much you get from the state. If you raise more money, does the state give you more money? I don't know that question that answer, but I think the roads are probably the most critical, and secondly, probably the town hall is probably the next critical building in town as far as needing work, and that town hall is going to be probably a $2 million bond. It really needs to be fully evaluated, and that needs to be done by somebody professional. And you need to, you can write a grant and get half of it paid for, and the town pays half. And then that's the only way that you can apply for LCHIP or any other state money, is to have a full assessment done. And that's not going to be a small group. It's got to be somebody that's really professional, that knows what they're doing, because the state won't touch it otherwise.
All right. We're just about out of time. This is the second thing. I'll let Mr. Hippler get in his critical issues, and we'll move on to the school board.
Well, Ms. Burdick, you stole my thunder. I was going to say the roads. But no, really, honestly, it's the roads. That's my feeling. We have developments that were put in the late 80s, early 90s, and those roads that were adopted have not been touched since that day. Ones that come to mind, Bartlett Drive. We were up there for a medical not too long ago, and it's like ski jumps. It's a mogul course for dirt bikes. Cram Road's not much better. Bogue Road, same way. These roads have not been touched, and like Ms. Burdick said, the current funding that we provide for roads currently is good for about a mile of complete down to rip up the dirt, the asphalt, everything, put new base down, new drainage, the whole nine. It covers 1 mile. We have over 60 miles of roads in this town. It's not keeping up. And with that too is now you have rougher roads, and what else suffers? Your plow trucks. The plow trucks are suffering because they're plowing these roads with the frost heaves and everything like that, and it's I mean, I see it every day. These trucks, like I said, they take it hard. They're not, with wing plows and the impacts that they take in the front of the frame rails, it's not healthy for the whole truck. And again, where roads, like I said, it's one of them things where it's so costly to do road maintenance and road reconstruction as a whole, and unfortunately, most of these roads need to come right down to pure base and start over. So to me, like I said, that is the most critical for the town at this point.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, could we extend this another 15 minutes? Due to the audio that we're not getting our full benefit of time.
Yeah, I do apologize for all the technical difficulties that we've experienced.
15 minutes out of this. And
Unfortunately, I would like to go to the school board, and if the school board wraps up earlier, we could switch to back to the board. Is there a substantial desire to hear more from the candidates on the board? Look at his hands. All right. We want to move on to the school board? No. All right. So I'll extend this one for about another 10 minutes or so, so as not to take too much away from the school board to make up. Mr. Lawton.
Yeah, John Lawton, Oak Hill Road. I have two quick questions, and it probably for Sherry, because I think we already know the answers from the two existing board members. First one would be on the development of a default budget. We obviously know where the two existing board members feel on that. Sherry, I would like to know what your opinion is on developing a default budget. It seems like they've deviated from what we used to do. And just a second one, I'll let you answer both, is that we used to have two public comment sessions at the town meetings. The early one was taken away by the existing board. I want to know what your opinion would be on reinstating that public comment.
All right, I'll answer that one first. I believe that we should put that back in at 7 o'clock roughly, so people can speak to public comment. And I know for a fact that there's been several older people that have come, and they've had to wait until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And one person in particular is 96 years old, and I don't think that's the right thing. They can do it at the end. But I think especially for the people that are coming in, and some of them are handicapped, some of them are older people, and they want to give their thoughts out on a subject, then they should be able to do it at 7 o'clock or thereabouts. As far as the default budget, I haven't looked at, I've looked at the default budget, but I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes. What I'd really like to see is that when there's money that's not being spent for whatever reason, say we've had police officers and they haven't been hired, I truly think that instead of leaving that money there and spending it on something else, that money probably should really go back to the taxpayers. I don't know that should just stay there and be used for whatever they decide they want to use it for. So, I'm not sure how you want me to answer that, because that's what I see. And I think that the default budget should be, probably pretty true to what the cost is actually going to be. So if you need $100,000 for one line item, and it can vary a little bit, well, maybe you put an extra 10% in. But at the end, partway through the year, when you know you're not going to use it all, I think that should come back.
Yeah, past practice was, Sherry, that if a department head proposed a line which was lower than the existing year's proposed line, let's say electricity was $50,000 this year, next year they proposed, because of a rate decrease, was going to be $40,000, they would propose 40. The old way of doing it would be knock the default back to the 40 for what their proposed was. It appears now that they go with what last year's was, which is legal. I'm not saying it's illegal, but it's just, I don't think it's, morally right.
I just think that you probably want to pat it just a hair in case something changes on any of those lines, but I don't think that you need to pat it the whole 10%, the whole 10,000. I think that if you put an extra couple thousand on that line item, in case something changes partway through the year, that you're not held with not enough money to pay the bill. So if that's, I don't know what, the state probably recommends that it's 10 or 15%. So I would think that somewhere in that ballpark, hold a little bit above what you think it's going to be in case something changes, but not a full 10,000.
All right. Which one of you gentlemen would like to go first? Mr. Hippler, you wish to respond? No? I'd like to move on to the next question then.
Tim Matheson, two questions for Mr. Hippler and Ms. Burdick. How would you go about the purchasing policy? How would you adhere to that? The second item is the town forest. Would you like that kept in more of a heritage setting that could be recreated, or the current way it is now? It's slash and impassable.
I'll answer the second part first, about the town forest. Both. And the reason I say both is because the management of those lands fulfills the town forest account. But again, and Mr. Lawton has brought it up many times, is this land is not being utilized, or it's not accessible. And I think it should be accessible. And as far as maintaining I'll say a trail system within it, I don't know exactly what the means of funding would be. I don't know if there would be a volunteer committee that would go out and do such activities as to mark and maintain. But like I said, again, to do any improvements and or purchase and or maintain, if there was an issue with drainage or runoff or soil erosion or something like that, you're going to have money in that account to manage that. So I think a balance between both needs to happen there. As far as the what was it? Purchasing policy, I have been a huge proponent of the purchasing policy, and the last year, I've really pushed hard on it, and Tom and I have had our disagreements on it, and also to the fact that that we need to probably revisit it and mend it. It hasn't been changed in quite a few years, but as it stands correct right now is anything over $1,000 purchased by the town department heads needs to be quoted. Anything over 5,000 is a request for proposal. And everyone, I go through the bills, I go through the manifests, and I look at the numbers, and when one goes above $1,000, I flag it instantly. I look at it and see, all right, it may be we bought 6 things that month that came over the $1,000. Okay, well, next page. But one purchase of over $1,000 needs to really, to me, needs to be quoted, especially if there's more vendors than just one that supply it. If we're contracted to the vendor, or it's a one, I use dealership parts for an instance. We have Volvo trucks down at the highway department. Some things are dealer only. You can't go anywhere else to get them. So I understand that, and that should be an exception to that policy. Just tonight's Wednesday, so Monday night, I didn't vote in favor of the manifest because there was one in there that I didn't like because it was over $1,500, and it was items that could have been, to me, quoted by somebody else. At least quoted. Now, could that have number been the lowest and the cheapest? Absolutely, but it's hard telling, not knowing.
Could you tell us what department put that in for $1,500?
There's been many offenders, but this week it was the police department.
We'll get the blue lights out and take him out, handcuff him. As far as the policy is concerned, I think you have to look at every department, and there are departments there that are very large, and $1,000 wouldn't even cover some of the parts that they need to buy. So I think when you're looking at like a fire truck that has some major problem with it, $1,000, if they need something to do to the engine, it's going to be several thousand probably, just like it would be for one of the plow trucks. So I think that when you're looking at heavy equipment, $1,000 really is not cutting it. That probably has to be looked at, maybe more like $2,500. That would be my guess, and I'm not making a policy. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense when you've got equipment that costs $200,000 and that you have to go buy a tire, one tire, and you need 4 tires on the truck, and the tires are $400 or $500 a piece, that they have to go out and get a quote on this. It doesn't seem, it's probably cheap. Yeah, I'm just making up a number, but it's a lot of money for these big truck tires, I know. So I think that the policy maybe for the heavy equipment should be raised maybe to $2,500. If somebody's going out and they need a couple tires for one of the cruisers, well, they should be able to put that on for $1,000, and they shouldn't have to go to bid. The other thing I think as far as policy is that all the policies that we have should be followed, and that's not always happening. So I think all the policies should be followed, whether it's hiring or whatever. That all has to be followed. You don't run a business if you don't follow the rules and do things right, and this is a business. And I'll speak to the forestry. I was really taken back at the deliberative session when I found out that there were years that we're only getting like $1,600 income, $2,200 income, $1,100 income. And I know that people have said that, they want to have walking trails. Well, if you go up and you look at the lot that was done up on Poor Farm, that lot was a slash, and that was chipped. And I imagine that that was a really small amount because they only pay about $4 a ton for the chips. And why we're not going in and selective cutting these forests and having it so you can go back every 20 years and do another selective cut, I don't know. That's something I'd like to look into. And the other issue I have with that is that when Bob Todd was the forester in Ware, I think, and I'm not positive, that he was on like a contingency plan. And he would go out and look at a forest and say what had to be done, what was coming out. And he got probably paid by the hour. He was not on a set fee. And now, the person that's there, and it's actually in your paperwork to vote this year, They wanted to go up to $30,000 a year. I personally think at this point, we shouldn't do that. That should be done on a job-by-job basis. It should get paid for. If you're only making $1,100 or $1,400 on a job, and that's the only jobs you've done all year, why are we paying a forester $25,000 or $30,000 for the year? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. We're in the hole before we start. We're never going to put any money away to buy any more conservation land. So I think as far as walking trails up there, John, on Poor Farm, the slash was chest high.
I'll start with the forest and then go to the policies after that.
I'll give Mr. Clow a chance to respond, especially since we're at the end of the session.
Okay, I was wishing that somebody from the Conservation Commission had been here during deliberative, so there are answers that we don't have that, as far as even how the forester is paid, when they say they're asking for $25,000 or $30,000. Now, is he paid by the hour? Is he paid by the job? Is that a contracted amount for the year? The Conservation Commission would know that. Nobody at the deliberative, including the selectmen, could answer that, and that's why one of the reasons the number was changed. But the other thing concerning the way the foresting is done, the board had some concerns with that, and they came from a citizen who, as Sherry said, was concerned about the way that the foresting was done on Poor Farm Road. So we invited the town forester in, and he went through the process of why it's done in certain ways in one forest and different in another. For example, the Eastman Conservation Area was done in a different way. They cleaned everything out and chipped it and left, I didn't like that either, but I mean, it was done in a different way. It didn't leave the slash there. Here, according to the forester, they left the slash intentionally because it created habitats for animals in the area. And it had been forested more recently, and so they could do it without the total cleanup job they had to do in the Eastman property. So I don't know. I'm listening to the forester, but we did ask to have somebody come in and explain it to us so that we weren't in the dark as a select board. Concerning the policies, actually, the discussion of the purchasing policy started this year when I came in with a recommendation that we did increase the amount that it needs to be put out to bid to $2,500, because I agree that $1,000 didn't seem enough. Right now, we have to have 3, not bids, but 3 estimates for anything $1,000 or more. And then anything $5,000 or more, we have to go out to bid on. It's very difficult to do. So what I'd like to see happen after the elections, whether it's me or somebody else, is to meet with each of the major department heads, because that's where these expenses are coming from. And okay, what is it that you can't live with in this? And come up with a policy that spells out when exceptions are viable and when they're not, so that we can follow the policy right to the letter, but also not make it impossible for somebody to get parts that they need or to have a project done that they need when it just won't fit within there and it's not practical. So those, sorry I snuck my 2 cents in too, Tim, on that. But
you snuck your 2 cents in, Tom, on that. In the deliberative session, you mentioned that it was unfortunate that no one was there from the Conservation Committee to answer what the 20% increase was. But a week or 2 prior to that, you mentioned that any item or expense that's brought to the board, you pass it along. But I didn't know, it's kind of confusing that you're passing it along, but you don't know what the money's going to be spent for. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember that specifically, but there are certain budgets that come through that are less itemized than others. The 2 articles from the Conservation Commission are almost identical every year. They ask for X number of dollars for a forester, and they ask for X number of dollars for money toward a purchase that might come up for conservation land during the course of the year. We trust what they're giving us. You're right, we didn't go back and question those because sometimes they're spent, sometimes they stay in the forestry fund for the year. What was the second part of that? Was there another part? Yeah, well, I think I answered that. You're right. I was going to toss in the library as well. The library prepares their budget. They give us one number. We accept that because they have their own board of trustees that create the budget, and we just pass along their number as part of the budget, not questioning individual lines.
All right. Thank you, candidates, selectmen.
Marge Burke, I respectfully request that we conclude the selectmen's part of this session and allow the school board candidates to be heard. You're 20 minutes over their time.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. I was just about to close. Thank you to all the candidates for selectmen, and we really thank you. Time for the school board candidates. So Mr. Davison isn't here tonight. Mr. Gilmet, Donnie Gilmet, Ms. Susan Moran, Ms. Heidi Coburn, and Ms. Wendy Curry. So I guess we'll go quickly to your opening pitch, starting from closest to me.
Hello, my name is Heidi Colburn. I have lived in the town of Ware for most of my life. I have attended all 3 schools here, graduated from John Stark. My husband and I have lived in town. He is also from town, many generations in town with his family. We are currently raising our 2 sons here, and we look forward to raising our sons where we grow up. Our 2 boys are just barely starting in this Ware School District, and it's important to me to ensure that they get the best education that they possibly can, and I look forward to being part of ensuring that everybody's children get the best education that they can. I myself am a teacher, not in town, in another district, and I think it's important to make sure that teachers have the proper training and opportunities, and are up to date with current curriculum and standards. My previous career was as a biologist, and so I also have experience with data analysis and whatnot, and sort of looking critically at what is necessary to move forward. So I hope to help all of our town's kids have the best education that we can. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Curry. Can you hear me? Okay. I have been in Ware since around 2000. My daughter has gone through the Ware School District. Is that better? Okay. She's about to go into John Stark. I've been on the school board before. Why I'm running, especially since my daughter is leaving this particular district, one of the very important things, and I think this is a great group. Like, there's no bad people up here, right? We all do what we think is best as parents and as taxpayers in this town. And for me, I think it's really important to my daughter that she sees me model giving back to the community. So whether it was president of the foster adoptive group am I losing you again? Okay. Or doing a dog rescue, being on the school board, being a Girl Scout leader, all those things are important to show her that you need to always give back to your community. I personally feel like the one school district that is in our area that needs the most attention right now is the Ware School District. And so I'd like to take my skill set in data analysis as well. I work for Dell. My job is as a test architect. They put me on a project, I learn all about something, and I rip it apart, and I advise them how to make it better. And I want to use that skill with our school board, with our administration, to improve our test scores, our safety. Heidi could tell you, there's a lot of things we want to work on.
Hello, my name is Donnie Gilmet. I've lived in town right before my oldest daughter was born. I have 4 children, all going to the Ware school system. Professionally, a little bit about myself. I've spent my entire career in nonprofit administration. I'm a CEO of a nonprofit organization. I've taught in higher education and also administration in higher education. I have an MBA and I'm currently finishing my doctorate in education and leadership. I think serving on the school board allows me to blend a lot of my passions in life. One, giving back to the community, particularly one that I live in, but also blends my passion for education as well as business leadership. I have an in-depth knowledge of budgets, what it takes to put them together, strong fiscal management. I myself am a taxpayer. I'm conscious of our budget and the impact on everyone's bottom line. I have a good, strong understanding of strategic planning and implementing those in a way that ensures successful outcomes. Innovative program development, and outcome-based education and evaluation. I've successfully served on the school board for 2 terms for 6 years. Currently serve as the vice chair, hoping for my 3rd term. I've worked hard with my fellow board members on several initiatives that have strengthened our school, including some new curriculums that we've pushed forward, standardized and outcome-based report carding, which closely aligns with John Stark, and also some initiatives around school climate. We've made some strides with our teacher starting salary and turnover. We've made some strategic improvements with an independent outside group that looked at school climate and has allowed us to sort of analyze that so that we can address some of those things as far as school climate is concerned to reduce turnover of teachers. I would agree with Wendy's points that there is some more work to be done. We need to make better strides on our standardized testing. We started to build the groundwork for that, and we're starting to see some dividends with that. We have a new iReady testing program that's really allowing our teachers the tools and the resources and the guidance to really analyze what key pieces that our students really need. We have targeted interventions and set aside times for students that need targeted instruction, and for those students that don't need that targeted instruction, we have some enrichment opportunities for them as well. We have better trained staff, our paraeducators. In the last contract that we had, we've put in place that our paraeducators are trained in either literacy or math, so we have that as a strong underpinning as well. We've also made some changes and looking at some changes in scheduling to make sure that we're making the best utilization of our students' time during the day. And we're also looking at some new curriculum and programming that will continue to help with this. I've enjoyed my time on the school board. I look forward to continuing the work that we've done collectively so that the students of Ware are given the best education possible to motivate them to succeed in life and also to foster a lifelong love for learning. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Morin. I'm seeking re-election. I'm just finishing up my 1st term with the Ware School Board. My husband, Jerry, and I moved to town 30 years ago this summer. We have raised 4 kids. They've all been through the Ware schools and John Stark. The schools prepared them very well for college. They were very successful. Our last one's graduating in 2 months, so end of an era for us. When they started school, I became active in the PTO. I was president for 3 years. I was asked to be on the kindergarten committee for the town, and I'm very proud that we now have a kindergarten program for our children. And it was passed the first year we put it forward. Around that time, I was also asked to be on the space needs for the Ware Public Library. So Don Burke and I did some research and put together a report that they used for the master plan, and then tabled everything, I think. But being in the library so often and meeting all the people, that led to 3 terms as a library trustee and treasurer for them, which I really enjoyed. At the end of that tenure, I was appointed to the Space Needs Committee for Centerwoods. That committee was advisory only, and at the time, the voted board made their own decision and did choose to establish the upper elementary school. And then the next year, I wanted to run, I ran for election and started here on the school board. So it goes fast. There is no real training for it, so I feel like I just figured out the process, and I want to move forward. Don and I have done a few of the things he's already spoken about. Climate is very important to me. I want the teachers happy. I want the students happy. I want a good culture in our school. And I want to keep moving forward on that as well. That's it.
All right, we'll take questions.
Back again, my name is Smitty. I got a yes and no. I'm going to ask you a question. I just need a yes or a no on each and every one of you. Do you believe that a teacher's politics should be in the classroom, or should they be teaching what the books say and not their personal agenda?
I'll start from the far end.
Yes or no? Should their politics be taught in the classroom?
Should a
No.
teacher be telling a kid about liberalism or conservatism? When I was a student, when I was in 8th grade, I had a civics class. That taught us how to run government. Not to pick if you're a Republican or a Democrat, a liberal, who to vote for, because that is crap in school. It should not be part of school. We're not there to, it's like a re-education camp that we're putting these kids through. And that's my question. Can we keep politics out of it?
Politics should not be in the Ware schools.
I'm not asking you if they should be. Should they be? I would like them to be removed from it. Is basically what I'd like to see.
Okay. I'm not aware that it is in the school.
It is.
In the classes, so
It is.
I would be,
So would you be willing to sit
look
with the
in-
school and say enough's enough with that and teach the kids education instead of politics? It's ridiculous.
I think it definitely warrants a discussion to find out where it's happening. I haven't heard anything about it, but that would be something that the board needs to look into, definitely.
I would concur with that. I think that, it's certainly putting forth any political view one way, another way should not be part of the curriculum. I think that if there are those issues, I would certainly welcome them to be brought to the school board and ensure that we either have a policy in place that is adhered to, or that they are addressed on an item-by-item basis. As Sue mentioned, I personally don't know of a situation that was brought up to the school board in regards to a particular, in my 6 years, maybe before then, that was brought up to us. If that is the case, I would be the first one to advocate that it's not brought.
As it is, if people want to be on the school board, can't you just make it mandatory that no politics are taught in these classes?
Absolutely, we certainly can. Absolutely, we certainly can. And we can make sure that that is being adhered to.
It's not that you can, it should be. And that's the bottom line. It should
Yep.
be. It should not be teaching kids who vote for it. I mean...
No, I agree with you.
that we're molding kids.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I do not know that currently exists. If it does exist, I would wish that people would voice that concern so that we can adequately address those and make sure that we address them efficiently. I agree with you 100%. And I think that we should have a policy. We should make sure that those issues are being addressed. If they are brought to the school board, rest assured that I will ensure and do everything within my power to advocate that they're removed from the classroom and the curriculum.
It feels like a little bit of a loaded question, and I feel like I just don't know the background. My daughter's in Ware Middle School, and she hasn't communicated it to me. That's the person that I would get that information from. Tippy nodded her head, so I know that she knows something. I have had issues with what some of my teachers have done in my daughter's classroom, and the escalation path is I talk to the teacher, then I talk to the principal, and then I talk to the superintendent, and then it goes to the school board. That's the process. If there's something they absolutely should not be telling children who aren't even a voting age who to vote for. I'd love to know, have the teachers, the principals, the superintendent not responded to your concerns?
I have not brought up those concerns.
Okay.
I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. I do not have kids that are, or grandkids that
Okay.
are in the school system here, because they don't live in Ware or Henniker. You just see it on the news all the time. I mean, if you have a conservative opinion, you're knocked out. But what in the hell are we talking to kids about this for? They should learn the history of their country.
Sure.
They should learn math,
Sure.
not politics. And that's what my thing is. So basically my question is, are you going to make a rule, yes or no, to keep it out?
We need an issue brought before the board. I can say no teacher can ever give a political view, but maybe that means we don't have Mr. Kirk come and talk to the school because he's from a political party. We need to actually understand what the issue is.
About that, ma'am. I'm talking about pressing kids, brainwashing kids is what I'm talking about.
I have not seen it in...
Well, maybe you have not seen it,
Nope.
but that does not make it not...
No, absolutely, which is why someone who's seen it and someone who I very well like nodded her head, so someone can bring that forward and we can get to the bottom. If there's a teacher brainwashing kids, then that teacher needs to go.
It's the system. It's the school system. 14% of the colleges, and I'm talking colleges and universities, 14%, only 14% in the whole country basically allow a conservative to talk in the school. They're not getting thrown out or booed out, and it's ridiculous. I mean, where is this education going?
Okay, thank you. I want to avoid going too far into the weeds here.
Yeah, but I'd like to get an answer from all of them. If you don't
I
mind, they're all running, right?
I will. I just took it because we're running short on mics here. So we want to keep it to the policy because we don't know of any specific instances in this district, and try to avoid like colleges and other things are doing, and just stick to the school board policy.
So I think this is hard to give a yes or no answer. I don't think any one person should be brainwashing children in any direction, whether it's politics or anything else. There are curriculum standards that teachers should be teaching. As a high school teacher, I have seen in the high school that I work at where politics are brought up as a learning opportunity for students to research candidates and to practice debate and educate themselves. So I think making a blanket statement saying politics need to be out of schools isn't necessarily fitting. But the idea of brainwashing children, having a teacher put upon their own mindset and saying that is the only thing, then that's not right. But I think educating them so that they know how to research both sides of the story and educate themselves on the process, on the candidates, whatever the case may be, I think that's really important to include in education. Less so, maybe in elementary schools, but both of my children, who are 4 and 5 years old, learned about their candidates in their school when it was time for the most recent election, and I think that's important. So there's no right yes or no to your question, I guess.
Is it yes or no that you would prevent it, is what I'm asking.
The brainwashing, yes, but I'm not going to...
Politics out as far as
Hey,
a Democrat...
Mr. Moderator, can we have a discussion here and not a debate?
It's not, I just want to get an answer.
Yeah.
So it's not a debate. It's just I need
Okay.
an answer. All I'm asking is for kids not to be taught Democrat, Republican. Be
Oh.
taught civics is what I'm asking.
So your question is, should children be taught Democrat or Republican?
No, I'm trying to stop that.
Okay. No, should they be taught which party to pick? Is that your question?
Why
All right. I believe she answered, but I'll let you answer again.
Yeah, I mean, I think I answered, so I don't need
All
to
right.
elaborate.
Believe in that you're saying that they shouldn't be indoctrinated as to which party to pick. So we move to the next question.
Neil Kirk, Mount Dearborn Road. We spend a lot of time trying to bring children up to where they should be, but we don't really spend a lot of time trying to bring out the most talent that children have. What are we doing, and what can we do to challenge the best and brightest students in the schools, not just the ordinary children or the children who aren't up to par? We spent a lot of time doing that. What are we going to do for the brighter kids so that they get the best, not the best possible education, but that they're challenged to do as much as they can conceivably do?
So this goes back to what I started to say in my introduction. I think it's really important to educate the teachers so that they have the right skill set to do exactly that. As a teacher myself, I am always looking for more professional development opportunities so that I can continue learning, because I don't want to stop learning, because that's going to be how I help others learn. And I hope that all of the teachers in the school district are offered that same opportunity. So one of the things that I want to look at is what professional development opportunities are provided to our teachers to allow them to better push our students in the ways that you're desiring.
So a year ago when I was on the school board, we started a new education process. It was Smarter Balance, and now it's New Hampshire. I don't know what it's called now. Marge could correct me. But part of that was taking kids at whatever speed they were at, getting to master at certain levels, and then keep moving. So if a student is excelling, that they could go faster and not be dragged down by the rest of the class. I think that was one of the goals of that program. Whether it's actually working out, it needs to be evaluated and enhanced. The other thing that our school does is an enrichment program for those kids who are not struggling in order to challenge them more. I think we should, again, review it with data and make sure that the kids who are very smart are not getting bored and checking out.
Piggybacking on a lot of what the two previous candidates have said, I think that we do need to do a better job at providing some professional development opportunities for our teachers to support them in differentiated instruction, both for students that are struggling with certain concepts, but also for students that are excelling at certain concepts. We all know that if we're enjoying what we're doing, we're challenged by it, we're more engaged in the process. I advocate for all students to develop a lifelong love for learning. As was previously mentioned, we have a wonderful enrichment program at both schools, well, all three schools, the upper elementary, Centerwoods Elementary, and the middle school, which really does a great job at providing opportunities for students, a certain tier of students that are excelling, to be involved with some self-guided exploration in certain things that they're very interested in. Also exploring some things such as STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, some of those opportunities as well. And also just making sure that all of our students, as you mentioned, not just those students that are struggling, but students that are excelling are given opportunities to maximize their education to the greatest degree possible.
It's hard being the last one. It's all been said. I do agree. I think the competency-based learning that we're moving toward is going to help kids master. They can go at their own rate a lot better than in standard, in traditional in the traditional ways. 20 years ago, I was thinking we needed to differentiate the classrooms. When I was growing up, you had the high end, and then they could go at their own pace. I've learned that it's not an easy solution. That wouldn't solve the problem. But I do think the competency-based learning is going to help in that regard.
Thank you. Next person.
Hi, I'm Dina. I live on Rockland Road. I work at the Ware Library. I have 4 kids, 3 who have completed through the schools and 1 who's in 8th grade. It's kind of a flip side of the question. What do you do for kids that kind of are quiet, they're smart, but they don't ask out, and if they're lacking in one subject, do they get to like, and they won't raise their hand and they won't ask questions? Do the teachers kind of, okay, the math is lacking, so let's help, do they flag that? Do they, how does that work?
And I think that goes to the new standard-based learning that we're going to. It does help differentiate what levels they're at, even per subject, in each subject, so that you can identify all the data they're talking about. I wouldn't know how to analyze it, but the administration does a really good job. There are committees that go over that, and they're using all the new data. And I think we have a very good professional development opportunities for our staff. So,
one of the most exciting things that I've saw personally in education with my children going into school is just the different dynamic that exists now in education. Particularly, we have a wonderful program that's adopted at the elementary school, the Responsive Classroom program and initiative. And I think that it really does do a wonderful job at addressing some of those things that you talk about. Giving students the confidence to be able to speak. I remember when I was growing up, I was a timid student at some times, and it was difficult for me. It was fearful to have to stand up in front of a group to talk. Now you can't get me to shut up half the time. But I remember as a student, that was a struggle of mine. But I have a couple kids that are on the shyer end, but I've seen them perform multiple times at all school meetings, and the confidence that they have, I think, are fostered in programs like the Responsive Classroom. So I think we do a great job at doing that. I think that we can continue to provide professional development opportunities for our teachers, to enable them to have the skill set to be able to tease those things out, not just for students that are excelling, students that are struggling, to identify that, students that are struggling emotionally with behavioral issues and things of that sort as well. I do think that we do a great job, and I've been blown away, quite frankly, with just the aptitude that our students are having with things such as public speaking and being confident learners and expressing their love for learning. Much more so than what I remember when I was in school, even though it's a distant memory.
I want to say I did not pay her to ask that question because that's one of my hot button issues. I have a shy 8th grader as well who will advocate for herself if she feels comfortable, but if there's a more prominent teacher that doesn't pull that out of him, she gets lost. So my mama bear side comes on, and then I talk to the teacher, and then I talk to the principal, and then I go to the superintendent, and then I go to Donnie, which is not the answer, right? So we do have some great things. We have math coaches, we have English coaches, we have paras. I think we need to spend more time figuring out how to do whatever, good cop, bad cop, make sure somebody goes around to some of these quieter kids so that they don't get lost, because middle school is where we're going to lose them.
At this point, it's been said, but I just want to reiterate a couple things that stand out to me. Again, being in the classroom, I see these kids every day, and so it's about having the proper training to know how to deal with those. I think school culture, both in the way that it was talked about earlier, with keeping teachers, but also school culture for the presence, for students to be able to connect with those adults. You see a difference when the connection is made, and that's why you're seeing the difference depending on the class that you have. And so more education on that. I have been in districts where there is a lot of professional development where teachers can go and observe their students in another class. That doesn't always happen at the younger grades, but even seeing how other teachers in their own building, how their own peers handle the same sort of students in other buildings. And so that's why I think professional development is such a big piece of this, because you need to have the experience, you need to have the background to be able to handle those. And making sure that we are providing that to our teachers so that they can handle it when it comes is really important to me.
Okay, next person to speak.
Yep. I just wanted to ask you guys' opinion on homework, where it comes to homework in the middle school, if you think that that is something that you agree with or don't agree with.
Homework's a tricky one.
It is. My third child's going through, my youngest is going through, and he has not had one stitch of homework this whole entire year. Yet I deal with hundreds of schools all over 3 states, and I'm in a lot of buildings, and there's something to be said for homework. So I'm just curious as far as a policy or what your take is on it. Because how do you learn moving forward if you've never had it and then you get to high school and you have homework for the first time? Honestly, you're in big trouble. And then you're struggling.
So I definitely have mixed feelings about this as a teacher, as a mom. On the teacher side of me, it's hard for me to know what they're really doing outside of the classroom. Is that your honest work? Is that the work of you, your friends, your mom, helping out, whatever? So I think the practice outside of school and getting into that routine is important so that there's not that shock, later on in life. But I think the true learning should happen in the classroom, right? In order for you as a teacher to know what your students are doing, you should see them doing it.
Right.
So the homework doesn't have to be a bunch of problem sets, but it's maybe, preparing something so that you can actively engage in whatever is happening in that class. So I think we need to shift what we think of as homework and not doing a bunch of practice problems that we don't.
That's busy work.
Right, but more preparing.
Writing takes time to do. So if you never critique it or do it again, and you're just doing it in class for the 40 or 45 minutes, and I just don't see how you progress on something without ever having homework.
I think the homework should be a place for prepping for what needs to be done in the classroom.
Okay.
Wow, I feel like I had paid a lot of people to say things today. So we've always had homework every year until this year. And we're 8th grade. I should have more homework than in 7th grade, right? But I've had no homework. I actually went to the superintendent and said, what's going on? The belief at the administration level was that shouldn't have happened, but it looks like part of the changing to each student is at a different rate. They haven't quite figured out how to do that homework piece, but it's clearly important. I know just to stay on top, we need to do extra work, even if I make it up at night, right?
Great. I believe in homework. I think that we should challenge our students to the greatest extent possible. I believe in academic rigor in the schools. Yeah. I think that there's a lot to be said for tangible benefits of homework. It's opportunity for extended learning that's outside, that time is precious. It gives an opportunity for exploration of other things, practicing of skills that are learned in the class. As mentioned before, I think that homework should not be necessarily things that are new concepts that parents need to teach their children, but an opportunity for children to practice skill sets, but also to teach their parents. And I think it's a great opportunity to have parents engaged in what's going on in the classroom, having their finger on the pulse of the learning that's happening with their children on a constant basis. I really thoroughly enjoy when my kids come home with homework. I enjoy that quality time spent with them, having them teach me new things that they're learning, having them express to me the excitement on certain things. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's a great opportunity to spend quality time with your kids. I also think that there's some great tangible benefits that go along with it. As you mentioned before, it teaches responsibility, time management, some very, very important skills that are not only applicable within the school setting, it's applicable in if they go on to college, if they go right to a career, a trade. You have to be able to balance those things. So I think it reinforces a lot of those those benefits. So I'm a big proponent of it, and I would be very much an advocate of continuing to ensure that we have the mechanisms in place to make sure that we continue on that path.
And again, I can check off time management, soft skill sets. I absolutely think that homework should be given. It's not a school policy. My kids always came home and said it was 10 minutes per grade. So in first grade, you had 10 minutes of homework, and it went up from there. My kids usually had more than that, so I'm very surprised to hear that nobody's getting homework this year. Hasn't made it to the board. I do think that the school day is so short now that they introduce a new concept, so I think they need that time to practice. They should never get homework of something that hasn't been taught, but they need that time to go over and practice it. And as far as kids teaching the parents, my third grader tried to teach me a multiplication grid or something, and I had 4 kids try and teach me that. I still can't get it, but it's a good try, though.
Next person, please.
Hi, I have a question. Given everything that's been happening over the past month, particularly in the high school with regard to safety, I was lucky enough to be part of a group of parents that came together for an interview regarding all these different things that happen at the high school. And parents in the town, I speak for myself, but I know I speak for a lot of other people, we're scared for our kids. It's a scary time that we live in. Everything that's been in the news is terrible. Some friends of ours are putting, this is a true story, bulletproof shields in their kids' backpacks. This is the level that it's gotten to. I haven't heard a single word about how anybody else, especially on the school board, in the SAU at all, feels about what we're going to do. What are we going to do to address this, to address not just my fears as a parent, but I have 2 kids in the high school. I have a senior and a freshman. They're scared when they walk in. They know what's going on. What is there anything that's in the works? How do we go about changing this? What do we do? There's the whole thing about a school resource officer. We don't have one anymore at the high school. I don't know why. I don't know if we're going to get one. This is a huge, huge concern for me. And I know it is for a lot of other people, and I think that a lot more people would be here if the weather wasn't so bad. So, thank you.
Yeah, safety in the school, we haven't had a meeting or a special meeting called since those incidences, so I'm pretty confident in March those issues will be discussed. We have gone through at the time. They went through and checked the facilities, the doors and the locks, the basic things, and made sure that everything was in place. Our schools are very safe. We do drills. They have the drills, the lockdowns, the evacuations that they do practice. I don't know. I hear a lot about arming teachers. I'm not a fan of that. I would not be in favor of that. But there is some legislation out there as well to add to safe schools to keep guns. New Hampshire's tricky because they don't allow you to keep firearms. Students, you have a policy for, but adults, you can't really mandate that. The Attorney General has declared that the state doesn't have the authority to regulate, but there is a bill that they're trying to pass so that it would bring it down to the school board level as far as if anybody would be allowed to bring it on campus. So I hope that we're a part of that discussion at our next meeting.
I think safety is paramount to everyone's concern. I mean, I think that we take it very seriously at the board level, that we take it very seriously. We work collaboratively with the police department. We regularly review our safety plan. We practice, as Sue mentioned, safety drills from a variety of different ways, fire drills, active shooter, those sorts of things. So we do that on a regular basis and analyze those from a policy perspective, but also from a practice perspective. Some of the things that you mentioned were in regards to the high school. Just a reminder that we're the school board for the elementary and the middle school. So we can only change sort of things at that level. Certainly, I think one of the biggest things that we need to do is continue to look at behavioral interventions, identifying students that are struggling, students that may be quiet, students that are removed, making sure that those students are getting the guidance and the oversight that they need, and if they're struggling, they need psychological interventions, that we treat that very, very seriously so that it doesn't balloon into some of these devastating issues. So I think that we need to continue to look at that. As Sue mentioned, we haven't had a school board meeting since the recent issues. I think sometimes the issues that come up are sometimes reactive. And I think the best strategies are being proactive, developing long-range strategic plans that address these things from a comprehensive perspective, that are in place, that's not just a flash in the pan. It's not just, getting bolts on the door. It's strategic. It's addressing it from a multitude of different perspectives. It's not just having a police officer in the school that may be holding a firearm. It's multi-pronged, and I think that we do need a comprehensive strategy to address that. I think we do that on an ongoing basis. Do I think it's something that we should do a better job of? Absolutely. I mean, I take the safety of my kids first and foremost, and I take it very serious that our schools are put in a position to ensure the safety of every single one of those kids that get off the bus or walk in or being dropped off. I take it very seriously, and I think our administration does too. And we work collaboratively with the community in addressing any suggestions that the community has for that, and developing a plan that is comprehensive and strategic as well.
So this isn't the first time this has come up. Right after Sandy Hook, we had a lot of discussions on the school board about the safety of our kids. When they redid Summer Center Woods, they put in a sort of safety latch at the front to make it safer for the younger kids. I would like to talk about some positive things, and then I'm definitely going to get to negative because I got plenty of those. I was thrilled to see the first day we came back to see our police chief just standing there greeting the kids, letting them know they were safe. Because as much as I want to put, and we could still do this. We could do bulletproof doors and glass so that somebody can't shoot in. We can absolutely look at that, but I also am afraid that how much am I going to traumatize my daughter by making her go through a metal detector to walk into the middle school? So we really need to work with the administration and find a balance of making sure that they're safe and they're comfortable and not traumatized more. So there's a lot of things we could do. I was actually pretty pleased to see that the superintendent at the end of the day sent out here's what happened, these were the 3 issues that were happening. I didn't expect to get that, especially that day, because they were in the middle of an investigation. That was a positive thing. With that said, there's a lot of things. I know that the debate goes by, do we put the elementary school kids on the same bus with the high school? Again, do we put in safety glass? And a lot of those things, unfortunately, come down to budget. So we need to come up with a committee with parental involvement and people that vote so that we can start addressing some of those issues.
I agree with what's been said. I just want to say one more thing about school climate. Again, when you build that climate of understanding and appreciation and having an adult that can be your family outside of your family, you start building those relationships of trust. And if we can get a school resource officer, again, I think having that really at the high school, but building the relationship with the students at a young age and getting to know them throughout their education, I think is also going to be helpful in addition to what has been said. I'm not going to repeat it. We're running low on time, I know.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Mr. Lawton?
Yeah, I do. Neil had mentioned earlier he was concerned with the children who probably get bored in school because they are. My concern lies at the other end of the spectrum. I'm a little concerned with the kids who are falling behind, especially in the reading area. I know in the first 3 years, probably kids will be at different, development stages as far as education goes, but usually by the end of the 3rd grade, they should all be coming pretty close to being equal. I guess my concern lies in that I know we spend quite a bit of money on special education. I guess I'd like to know your philosophy on evaluating that special education, especially in the reading field. I served on the school board for several years back a few years ago, and I remember asking the special education director at one point, he gave us a report on special education, and he told us X amount of children are in it. So I asked a question of him, and I asked, at what age, what level do you bring these children in? And he would say, well, they bring them in second grade, first, second grade, or third grade. And I said, well, how many of those children are up to grade level by the time they leave our school system in the end of the 8th grade? And he told me at that point, 0. And I says, well, wow, that seems to me that would be a failure of the special education. If you have 5 or 6 years to work with a student and you have not been able to get them to grade level, I'm not talking all students, but I'm talking any students, that seems to be a failure to me. And it worries me to the point that, you know, we have all this great special education supposedly, but I'm worried as to the point, do we evaluate it and do we make changes that are necessary to make it move forward? Because I see a lot of kids that go up to the high school that aren't really ready to be up there. And I know we probably don't practice retention down here, and I'm not saying I'm an advocate for retention necessarily, but I think we need to do something. I know that self-esteem enters into all of this and everything, but self-esteem to some degree has got to be earned. And I'm just wondering, you know, what we're doing to evaluate our special education, especially in the reading aspect of it, okay?
And thank you, Mr. Lawton. I know we're running short on time, but I'll give the candidates a chance to answer the question.
So, as someone who's not currently on the board, I don't know what we are currently doing, so I'm not sure if I can fully answer that question. I think an important piece in my mind is early intervention. You mentioned first, second grade. You know, if students can be evaluated and picked up as soon as possible, I think that's helpful, but I don't think that's fully what you're talking about. I think you want to know how the system is being evaluated. Is that right?
Evaluate the special education. How do we evaluate it so that we know it's doing the job we intended to do?
And I don't, yeah, I'm going to pass.
And so we get back to data. So they test, and the threshold for an IEP is something that you get if you're really struggling, you're below like the 20th percentile. That's a state mandated, we have to give them some extra help. There's a whole bunch of more kids, you know, it sounds like someone you're talking about, someone I am close to, who are struggling that don't hit that low bar. And so what happens is if the parents advocate them for them and you're a pit bull, you can get this thing called Ready for Intervention, and that'll help with your kids. But we don't, at this point, if the parents don't advocate, and they shouldn't, right, that shouldn't be the first case. It depends on if the teachers identify the kids, right? The special ed doesn't go and meet all the kids and identify which ones have issues. It comes from the teacher, right?
Absolutely. One of the benefits of having multiple children is seeing the differentiation in the ways that they learn and the struggles that they have. I think in you know, as Wendy pointed out, there are certain students that meet a threshold that puts them in a category of special education. But my philosophy, and I think that one that is embraced by the school, is one that all students are monitored for continual progress. It's not necessarily that you read at grade level and you're there, that's great, you're in the 5th grade, you're reading at the 5th grade level. It's continuing to make adequate progress. I think that we need to ensure that students, when they do get out the other end of our care, whether it's the other side of elementary school, the upper elementary school, and the middle school, that they are prepared and that they've continually made progress. I've had one child that has received special education early on, early intervention, struggling with reading, was given some targeted strategies that have helped her. She's no longer in special education. She's up to grade level. She was strongly struggling for a period of time. That's a success story. I know that oftentimes that's not always the case, but I believe in a philosophy of making sure that all students, regardless of their ability, especially those students in special education, are continually challenged. They're continually making progress, making sure that they have the resources to do that. Reading coaches, professional development opportunities, math coaches, trained paraeducators that work side by side with our teachers to reinforce some of the things that are learned in differentiated instruction as well. So.
All right. Well, I wouldn't repeat everything that they have said. I think the interventionists do a good job individually. I think your question really goes to the data. We would need to be following up every year and checking the data to see how the student growth is going, and following up, holding them accountable as well.
Can I just add one quick thing, is that we do utilize a comprehensive program, iReady, which if you don't have kids in the school system, I'd really love for you to take a look at it, because it really does look at specific things that students are struggling with, and it monitors individual growth from year to year. Yes, every child does get that. And our teachers we just implemented it this year. There's like anything, there's a learning curve that goes along with it, both from parents.
Grade or class had a certain number, and they only allotted them to those students that fell in a specific area.
No, that's not the case at all. All students are receiving those targeted interventions, the iReady testing. They're monitored on a regular basis. We're working with staff on an ongoing basis, providing them with professional development and how to analyze that data, how to utilize this very powerful tool to better enable our children to succeed.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I know most of you are probably pretty anxious to get home, considering, there's a blizzard outside.
Any word on school tomorrow?
Okay. So at this point, we'll be adjourning the meeting, and all of you have a safe trip home. Drive slowly.